Good afternoon, handy viewers and handy listeners, such as you are, and welcome to this Tuesday afternoon, honest, as we look at the second blog of the introduction to rules changes that we will be seeing in the forthcoming Season 4 of Guild Ball. I am joined once more by Mr. Connor Rooney. Say hello, Connor.
Hello.
It's the same hello every single time. It's unnerving. And, of course, my good friend, Mr. Panzer Harris.
Hello.
Oh, there we go. Not quite so formal, slightly more creepy. Nice. So, we have seen once more a blog detailing some of the changes we're going to be seeing to Season 4. And again, I have gathered the brain trust, such as it is, to go over this. So, beginning, as I do with the blog, we're going to have a quick look at the difference between allocated and gained in terms of influence. Now, this is quite an interesting one, I thought, as we were having our little pre-record chat as to who this actually impacts, because certainly we've seen a lot of gain influence in the past. Connor, you've been around a little while. Am I right in thinking that Tapper used to gain from his heroic?
I think it was gain, but I'm not 100% sure. But I know Bag of Coffers used to be gain.
Bag of Coffers used to be gain. Then we sort of started delving through all the abilities that add influence and move influence around. Panzer, you were talking about the farmers in terms of veteran honor and fallow. I was sort of chipping in with the mortician's angle with misdirection and tormented agony, and we very quickly came to the opinion that the vast majority of all influence amending, whether that's traditional abilities that have been going for a long time or more recent ones like adaptive strategy for veteran chisel, are all allocate already. Like, this is not a huge amount of change. In fact, the only one that we could think of, the two that we can think of, one is the example that they give in the blog itself, that of Grace's blessing, and also Honor's legendary topping out. So by that assumption, either every single Mason is going to gain an additional influence cap, which I find unlikely. If all Masons suddenly go to 2-5 rather than 2-4, or topping out is going to change in such a fashion that that we're unaware of at this point. But really, this appears to be a change that's already been long in the making. Connor, would you not say?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think this is not quite as much of just a tidy up as close control. The example they gave there, but it's close. It's basically just Grace, who I don't think it really matters for, because I've never seen someone put 5 on her anyway. And then it's just Honor's legendary, really, that's competitively affected by it.
And that's a huge assumption on our part, that Honor's legendary is going to stay the same as we head into Season 4.
Exactly. It could easily change completely. It could just become armor, or they could just make it allocate. And to be honest, you probably lose 1 or 2 influence that way when you use it. But it's not, it's not the end of the world. It's still a good legendary.
And certainly from like a pundit's perspective, Panzer, as a fellow pundit, one of the conversations I've had with newer players is, explaining the difference between allocate and gain and how that works mechanically. I can only really see this as a benefit, this tidy up.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I've only really kind of discussed it with a couple of newer Masons players. Nobody else has actually come across it to raise it with me. So,
yeah.
It's not as it's been said, it's not a massive change, but it does definitely kind of fit in with the tidy up that the rules are getting as a whole. So, I'm all in favour.
Yeah, more than anything, this is just, perhaps dealing with legacy confusion, with avoiding problems before they even occur. Would that be a fair summation, gents?
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
So, is there anything we really need to say more on the subject?
Not that I can think of.
The power of silence. Now, this was an interesting one for me, as I hastily build and paint a whole bunch of terrain for the Big Bad Bibble Bash in September. Currently we have a situation where you can stand on obstructions, where it's possible for your models to be stood on terrain pieces within the pitch. Now, of course, wobbly model syndrome is a thing, but now that we're in a situation where you can't leave a model on any kind of terrain piece outside of ground, I mean, I'm a fan of this just for sort of clean play. And sort of keeping things tidy on the pitch. But, Ben, again, from the sort of a pundit's perspective, as you're teaching people the game, does this make life easier for you? Does stopping people from putting their models on wobbly bits of terrain?
Again, it's one of those things. It very rarely came up because most people kind of you look at, for example, the terrain pieces. A lot of people, because Guild Ball has such a a painting requirement. A lot of people get painting earlier, and they're a lot less keen to put a painted metal model on a wobbly bit of terrain. If it falls off, it chips. So people just don't seem to do that. So it's not been a huge problem. I've not actually had anybody try it at an event either. So,
but but the only thing I could really think of where this sort of impacts on competitive play. Is Theron. Now, one of my regular opponents up at sort of Thor's Hammers Gaming in Boreham Wood is the hype train himself, Mr. Aaron Wilson. And of course, one of his favourite tricks is to pin a beater on my team or anyone that I'm particularly looking to focus on, and then going to stand behind a terrain piece in such fashion that I won't be able to reach them. Now, not being able to stand on terrain at all, to my mind, Connor, this almost sort of gives Theron a little nudge. I'm not saying it's a huge buff or anything like that, but it looks to my mind that it just makes doing that sort of Theron pinned annoyance a little easier.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think any ranged denial pieces get slightly harder to get to, but the upside is they are no longer unmovable monsters that can stand on terrain, and you have no way to get them off there.
Oh, okay, yeah. So pushes, of course, you can't use a push to move an opponent's model over terrain. Equally, Puppet Masters and the Seduce can't do so. So you can't just stand on a crate and suddenly being immune to being moved.
Which is nice. I always thought that was kind of stupid.
Okay, so that's quite a nice trade-off. So, all right, yes, Theron gets a little nudge, but everyone else gets a benefit of being able to impact people, yeah?
Yeah, I love this change. I think it's either my favorite or second favorite after the AoE change. Mostly because of what Panzer said, in that, I have a lot of my fisherman models, spent a lot of time painting, and they're all on resin bases that are, not the super balanced, and they're all pinned. And I would not... I think twice I put a model on terrain in a tournament, and both times I just asked my opponent if I could use a proxy base because I didn't want them to risk them falling. And it also is just something a lot of people don't think about. And unless you're playing with 2D terrain, it's a lot of, or super flat boxes. A lot of the time, your opponent will be like, "Oh, you can stand on this, right?" And you're like, I don't know. I would prefer if you couldn't, but if the model balances, you couldn't really say that they couldn't. So I'm glad this is cleared up, and it also makes the random terrain that you pick up at the store less important.
Yeah,
which I also like, because I think just having someone put one box on this table, but the sideways barrel on the other one being a major tournament factor feels kind of not ideal.
I mean, certainly, again, as a TO and as a pundit, just having the rules be the same between a barrier and obstruction means that when I am showing people the game, when I'm teaching people how to play, that it's not a case of one for one, one rule for one bit and one rule for another. Where certainly I've seen games on stream where in one game they've called it a barrier, therefore they can stand on it, and one game they've called it an obstruction, because of course the players are free to discuss that amongst themselves. It's not set by the tournament organisers. And sometimes it is a little ambiguous. So, again, much like the previous rule, sort of a general thumbs up from us in terms of just common sense.
Yeah, common sense and clarity.
Who knew such a thing could exist in the world of gaming? Now, I think we're certainly getting in towards the meatier end of things. We've seen a lot more increase in zero cost plays, and we're really sort of shifting now from blurring the lines between the two. I think it's fair to say, like we've seen on Horizon's card, this 5-inch dodge. Now that during Season 3 could well have been a zero-cost play as opposed to a trait on the back. So it just seems, again, this just looks to be, to my mind, just a tidy-up of just, this is what this is how you use it. Whether it's an active trait, zero active traits appear to have replaced zero-cost plays. Is that fair to say, Ben?
Yeah, it is. To be honest, again, it's another thing. Just keeping it simple. They're kind of trying to. Can I do this zero thing more than once per turn? How many times can I do it? Well, if it's an active trait, then it's pretty clear it's only once per turn.
That's a good shout. Because certainly, I mean, we've all come from other games where zero-cost abilities are a thing, and then abilities that allow you to do zero-cost abilities multiple times per turn are a thing. So I guess it's not just a case of people within Guild Ball, but also people coming to Guild Ball.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to use one of those other games, Malifaux as an example, kind of zero actions that are defined in the core rules. If you have a zero action, you can only use it once per turn. Which is kind of seems to be something Guild Ball's gained lately, because I don't believe it is in the core rules.
No. It's don't think so. Sort of come. I suppose Hammer is the origin of the zero cost play, which is certainly the example they gave. I can't remember if it was season when he was first introduced, if they were 1 or 0 cost plays, or
they've always been 0 cost plays since he was introduced.
So we can essentially blame Hammer. for all of this.
That's okay. We blame him for many things. So what's one
Which
more
is
on
interesting. To say then later on within this blog piece that Hammer is one that they very much focus in on, and saying that Iron Fist is going to a cost of 1. Now, this I don't know. Like I need to know more. I mean, there's this. This is sort of a classic gamer blog where information is given and no information is given, because if Hammer's Iron Fist is I'm paying 1 influence to give myself +1 damage, that's like a self tool up, that makes sense. But if it's pay 1 influence to take an influence from somebody else to give my, do you see what I mean? Is it gone from a big?
That feels bad.
That feels super inefficient. So, I mean, certainly, Connor, we've seen a lot of Hammer on the competitive circuit since his buff after July of last year. Is this the end of Hammer time?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to find out. I know in the original design for Hammer, he did damage to his teammates.
Yes,
to take the buffs. So maybe they'll go back to that design brief. It costs him 1 influence and damage on someone.
But that,
or maybe it is just basically...
That feels a very Pinvice thing to do, because of course her deletions and controller
exactly
do damage. So shared design space has never really been a thing.
But yeah, you could also say just the fact that 1-cost character plays that only buff themselves is also... I mean, Pinvice can do it to others, but it's still... Yeah, this is probably the one I'm least of a fan of, because I actually like the 0-cost character plays. I think they add quite an interesting thing to the game. But having seen Horizon, it looks like that design isn't going away. It's just moving to the back of the card.
We're just going to call them active traits and put a little bullet point on them, and that's fine. It
does feel like only Hammer is going to be the one kind of caught between, because he's the only one I can think of that uses multiple 0-cost plays. But
it's interesting because you could certainly call excuse me, you could certainly call Esther's songs 0-cost plays, for example.
For sure.
So it'll be interesting to see how all of that changes. That's what I mean. Like this change sounds interesting, and it also sounds quite innocuous, and like the other two, a bit of a tidy up. But then it's that example of Hammer really just sort of, for me, set my mind whirring. Is like, what are they doing? Like,
especially since both of us are playing a decent amount of Hammer.
And with the changes to theorized changes to Honor's Legendary, and now these changes to Hammer's zero-cost traits, it suddenly looks like potentially both Mason's captains could be seeing something of a rewrite, at least in terms of core design. And I'm absolutely convinced that the Masons forums will have a perfectly reasoned and in no way overblown or over the top reaction to any of this.
Well, I mean, they were right about Marbles being the worst mascot in the game. You never see him.
No, yeah, moving on.
But if I could just add quickly on
please,
just kind of looking at it from a teaching perspective, trying to teach people how his zero action plays work. It was essentially you had to leave the influence on a different player.
Yeah.
But now basically you can put that influence on him himself. So maybe that's, it's an easier thing for people to get.
That makes a lot of sense. That is, mate. Yeah, if it's just I'm going to spend one influence and I get slightly better, I sacrifice potentially an attack to do +1 damage. Yeah, that you're right, Ben. That's a much easier thing to teach to people. Good shout.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where exactly it lies with him.
Yeah. All right.
Oh,
so
definitely.
on to the final one, and potentially the biggest thing is all of a sudden we've got a bigger roster. So going from a 10 model roster to a 12 model roster. Now, admittedly, although Panzer, I've asked you to put a teaching new players hat on. This, to me, feels like it's going to have a considerably bigger competitive player impact.
Yeah, I mean, it's just worth pointing out for maybe people who haven't been to events that this purely affects event play.
Yeah.
Casual play, it's always been, pick what you feel like. But kind of events, people have been tied to, 8 models to 10 models that you then pick your 6 from.
Now, certainly, whenever we sit down for a casual game at a gaming club, we usually do follow the tournament drafting rules, just because we go to tournaments. That's how we like to play. But all of a sudden, not having to ditch quite as many people. How, Connor, where are you on this? Where are you on having an additional 2 members to bring along to your tournament? 12.
I don't like it.
Oh.
I mean, I've discussed. This is something that's been a while coming. I think most people saw this coming, if for no other reason than going to 6-man boxes of everything kind of makes it make sense. And it does make it easier, I think, but I don't know. Guild Ball really lacks a list building element.
Yeah.
And the closest we got was trying to write a 10, and it used to be really easy, but the last few editions of models made it actually quite difficult for some teams. And I actually found that quite fun, trying to figure out who you could fit in and who you can't. And now, for most teams, they'll have to drop 3 models, and that just doesn't feel like that big an opportunity cost, especially since it's quite easy to just make one a mascot, which then means you're dropping your 2 least favorite models. I think it helps out certain teams at the moment, but I think that's pointless to talk about because all the cards are going to get changed anyway, so it's hard to say. Like, if this happened now, Union would be a big winner. But by the time it happens, Union will have lost some of their options and things will have been errataed. So I can't say... Well, I think at least. I guess we don't know. They could technically come out with this prior to Season 4, but...
I mean, I have to say, as the resident Morticians player, so the one that already has their minor guild. Now, one of the strengths I've always personally found with playing Morticians is that I have this massive toolbox of players to draw from, and all of a sudden I can take more tools with me, and that's quite an intriguing prospect to me.
Yeah, I think that's the upside, and I think. I don't want to say it affects teams differently, but I do think the more flexible and tech PC a team is, the more of an advantage it is. So say, like, if you're an Honor player who just loves playing the box 6, the fact that other teams get more options and you as well as you, it doesn't really affect you as much. Whereas teams like Morticians or Union that have very specific pieces with specific roles are helped out more by it, which isn't a bad thing necessarily. And again, if it is a bad thing, that's a balance issue, and they can fix that. It's more, I like the difficulty of cutting things, and I think it's a fun part of the game that won't be quite as fun.
And I have to admit, I'm very pleased that what we're not seeing here is a complete, you can take whatever you've got. You know,
Agreed.
I think it would have been very easy for Steamforged to just go, you know, you've got 15 toys, you've bought 15 toys, you've painted 15 toys, you can choose from 15 toys. From a business perspective, that would, to me, make more sense. And I think it's fantastic to see that we're still seeing not a business decision, but a game decision. You know, all right, the opportunity cost is lessened, but you know, it's still very much there. I mean, Connor, you and I are part of a London WhatsApp group with about 40 other people, I think, which is in constant motion. And I can remember one chap saying that Friday wasn't in his 10, and I turned away from my phone to do a bit of work and looked back, and there was like 185 messages racked up. Well, people,
that was quite fun.
Why people disagreed with him. So it's nice to know that that sort of discussion and community will still be centered around choosing a Tournament 12, but it's not gone entirely.
I've got to be honest, I disagree completely with both of you.
Okay.
I'm very much of the fact of the camp that if somebody has it, why can't they use it? Again, I think it's probably a holdover from my Malifaux days where, you know, if it was a fixed pool of models tournament, I didn't go. I didn't enjoy that style of things.
Sure.
I agree there is, you know, there is still a list building element in the game, but to me that, you know, on tournaments, that puts more of an onus on the draft to choose your 6.
Yeah.
There is still a conscious list building element within picking those 6 models. And I think, you know, going up to 12 models, it begs to me the question, why bother? Because I've got my blacksmith sat in front of me, and they have 13 models total.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So pick one to leave at home. Farmers Guild, I believe, also have 13 models. Choose one to leave at home.
15. 15
well,
until
they'll have 13.
They'll have 13 after season 4. Yeah, no, it's a good point.
Yeah, to me it does feel like a bit of an artificial thing that they've put in there. The key, you know, kind of list decisions are still which 6 players do you hit the table with?
Yeah.
Which tools do you choose to respond to your opponent's tools?
Yeah, it's interesting because I actually loved attending pooled events in Malifaux for that exact reason. I thought it was quite fun trying to figure out what to bring. But I totally get it. And I actually kind of agree with you more than if they hadn't changed it from 10, because I think you lose so much of the list building that it's kind of like, especially when Union become closer to everyone else, it's like, I mean, you could have gone to full roster.
It's interesting, though, you mentioned Union, that we're not seeing, you know, this is presumably still one Union choice. So it's still very much a, you know, keeping things within the guild. But perfect. I think, gentlemen, I think we've covered all bases. I think unless anyone's got any final closing statements on the roster, that we'll leave it there. Anyone else anything to add?
No, I think I'm good.
No, got nothing.
Perfect. Excellent, gentlemen. Thank you once more for joining me to go through this new blog describing Season 4 changes. Hopefully there's more to come, and certainly looks like we've got another Navigator piece to come shortly as well. So, gentlemen, I'll be sure to grab Connor for that. In the meantime, handy viewers, handy listeners, such as you are, thank you very much for your time, and as ever, I need a better outro.